Have you ever had an entire conversation with someone without actually talking to them? You're in shower, walking alone, lying in bed at night, and suddenly your brain starts creating scene. You imagine what they say, you imagine what they say back, and somehow you give the perfect response, the perfect explanation, the perfect comeback. Sometimes you even imagine their reaction. They finally understand you, they finally respect you, they finally realize what they did. And for a second, it feels real. When emotion changes, you feel angry, excited, and sometimes even anxious. Then you came back to reality, realize none of it actually happened. So why does your brain keep creating situation that doesn't exist? And more importantly, why can this imaginary situation become so addictive? Because sometimes you are not imagining a fake scenario. You're trying to emotionally solve something that reality never solved for you. Your brain has an incredible ability. It can stimulate future without actually living it. Before an athlete performs, they might imagine the moment. Before an important conversation, you might imagine what they are going to say. Before an exam, you imagine yourself sitting in the room. This is called mental stimulation. Your brain is basically running a rehearsal. It's asking what could happen, what should I do, what will I respond. Normally that's useful. But sometimes the rehearsal doesn't stop. You haven't even had the next conversation. Your mind has already experienced 10 different versions of it. That's where something interesting happens. Your imagination stops being preparation, start becoming repetition. Conversation you wished you had. Think about an argument you had recently. Maybe you stayed quiet, maybe you couldn't explain yourself properly, maybe you thought of a perfect response, but only after the conversation ended. And hours later, your brain says, wait, I should have said that. So you replay the entire situation, except this time you win. You explain everything perfectly, you say exactly what you wanted to say, and the other person finally understands. And for a moment, your brain gives you something reality didn't. That is closure. That's why this imaginary conversation can feel strangely satisfying. You're not simply talking to an imaginary person, you're correcting an emotional experience. Your brain is taking an unfinished situation, trying to create a finished ending. But there is a problem. The conversation is over. Reality has already moved on, but your brain haven't. So it keeps editing the past. And there are the future scenarios. But fake scenarios are not always negative. Sometimes they are beautiful. You imagine yourself getting successful. You imagine someone finally recognizing your potential. You imagine yourself becoming confident. Maybe you imagine telling someone, I told you I would make it. And there is nothing wrong with that. Actually, imagining a future can help you plan for it. But there is a subtle psychological trap. Sometimes your brain starts giving you the emotional reward before you have done the work. You imagine the achievement, you feel proud, you feel respect, but you haven't actually moved any closer to it. This is where imagination can become escape. Because why struggle with uncertainty in reality when your mind can create a version where everything already worked out? You don't have to fail, you don't have to be rejected, you don't have to wonder what people think. Everything is under your control, and that's incredibly comforting. The third type is even more interesting. Worst case scenarios. What if they misunderstood me? What if I fail? What if something goes wrong? What if I leave? What if I embarrass myself? Your brain starts creating situations that haven't happened and then preparing you for them. You haven't received the message, but you already imagined the argument. You haven't gone to the interview, but you have already imagined yourself failing. You haven't been rejected, but emotionally you already experienced rejection. This is where imagination becomes connected to anxiety. So why do people do this so much? This is the part most people miss. People who frequently imagine fake scenarios aren't necessarily overthinkers. Often their mind is highly focused on possibilities, social interaction, and emotional outcomes. They are constantly asking, what did the person mean? How do I come across? What if I had said something different? What will happen next? Their brain is monitoring the social world, and imagination becomes the laboratory where all these possibilities get tested. You say something, then your brain creates 5 different reactions. Someone look at you strangely, your brain creates an explanation. You have an awkward conversation, your brain rewrite it. You have an important goal, your brain creates an entire future on it. It's like having a movie studio inside your head. And sometimes you don't even realize you are watching another movie. Here is the why it can feel addictive. The most powerful part isn't the imagination itself, it's the control. Real life is unpredictable. People don't respond the way you expect. You can't control whether someone understands you. You can't control whether you will succeed. You can't control how someone feels about you. But inside your imagination, you control the script, you control the dialogue, you control the ending. You can finally say the perfect things. You can finally become the person you want to be. You can finally get the recognition you crave for. And that's why imagination can become emotionally rewarded. Not because the fake scenario is better than reality, but because reality contains uncertainty. And imagination removes it. And we all know that human brain loves certainty. The dangerous shift. Now imagine doing this every day. You feel lonely, you create a conversation. You feel insecure, you imagine being admired. You feel angry, so you reply the argument. You feel uncertain, so you imagine every possible future. And slowly your brain learns something. And that is whenever I feel uncomfortable, I can escape into a scenario where I have control. That's the loop. Motion, imagination, temporary relief, reality, emotion again. If you repeat it enough, the imagination becomes automatic. You are not consciously deciding to imagine, it just happens. You are walking and suddenly you are somewhere else. You are studying and you are having an imaginary conversation. You are trying to sleep and your brain starts writing an entire movie. And sometimes you can spend 20 minutes inside a situation that never exists. So, should you stop imagining? No. Imagination is not your enemy. Your brain needs imagination. It's how you plan, create, predict, practice, solve problem. If you are replaying argument, maybe you are looking for closure. If you are imagining success, maybe you are craving recognition. If you are imagining worst case scenarios, maybe you are trying to feel prepared. The scenario is often just a surface. The emotion underneath is the real story. The simple test. Whenever the next time you catch yourself inside a fake scenario, don't immediately force yourself to stop. In fact, pause yourself and ask, what am I getting from this imaginary situation? It can be control, recognition, closure, safety, connection, confidence. Then ask one more question. Can I meet that need in reality? If you imagined giving someone the perfect explanation, maybe write down what you actually want to say. If you imagine becoming successful, then take one small action towards the future. If you imagine worst case scenarios, separate what you know from what you are predicting. Because the goal isn't to destroy your imagination, it is to stop using imagination as a substitute for living. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth about the fake scenarios. Sometimes we don't keep imagining because we are fascinated by the imaginary world. We keep imagining because the imaginary world gives you something reality haven't given us yet. That is control, closure, recognition, and a sense of being understood. And more often we receive those feelings in our head, the less pressure we feel to create them in real life. But your brain can stimulate 1,000 conversations. None of them will ever replace one honest conversation. You can imagine 100 versions of your future, but none of them will ever move you towards that future. In fact, you have to take action in real life. So the next time you catch yourself inside a conversation that never happened, don't judge yourself. Just notice it. Because maybe your mind isn't randomly creating stories. Maybe it's trying to show you something you desperately want to experience or real. And the moment you understand what that is, then you stop rehearsing life. You finally start living it.